We began in 2018, and we are a voluntary carbon marketplace, but we're a full exchange. We began in Singapore and incubated there from 2018 to 21, and in Feb 21 went live as a spot market for voluntary carbon credits, working with Vera and Gold Standard Registries, ACR, CAR, and such. Subsequent to that, as we built membership, we also built country level of interest, and the nature of the voluntary market is very much on the back of the Paris Accords. Each country has its own responsibility, but carbon is borderless, and as is the production of carbon, different projects and project types around the world. So we started to scale, and we're up to 200 member firms, and are across 31 different countries, which is quite interesting as a market scaling. But as a result of it too, the different countries, the 195 signatories to the Paris Accords, they all have an obligation to do their domestic reporting as well as being interconnected. So we built the exchange to serve both of those purposes. One, build a global marketplace, not just domestic, but at the same time address the domestic requirements at country level. So we've had countries approach us with existing exchanges like IDX in Indonesia or JPX in Japan or as such, and requesting us to bring our expertise and our market model into the home country so they could address their emissions trading scheme domestically, but at the same time create an international order book. So AirCarbon is building this, we own our own tech stack, but at the same time we're doing interconnectivity across this emerging market, voluntary credits. Probably the most active venture is in Brazil. We did our first auctions there last April onshore with a Brazilian partner, and we're currently in discussions to work with the local market operators, obviously B3 being that. But similarly, we've had discussions with Bursa Malaysia, as well as JPX in Japan, and IDX in Indonesia, AFEX in Greece, JSE in South Africa, EGX in Egypt, in Barbados. So it's very interesting and diverse, and it's really a bit of an education as well as addressing country level commitments. The advent of deliverable commodities is really my background. I began in the cotton markets and ended my career in New York in the energy markets and gas. And being part of the exchange, the members, you learned every part of it, or whatever you were willing to do. If all you wanted to do was trade, you showed up, traded, and left. Other guys, you got into the committees and you learned how to do delivery mechanisms. And as you launch new contracts, you become liquidity or market makers. And that was the side I sat on, and I was on the board at NYMEX ultimately. You learn all the good parts and you learn where the parts don't work and the inefficiencies. And I think as we got to, obviously, clearly we're well down the pike on electronification. But interesting, watching how the exchanges either do or don't deal with deliverable mechanisms, the broker-dealer model, the back office processes away from the exchange, and incorporating them into, what constitutes good delivery and performance of a contract on exchange for clearing and settlement. Carbon is a digital asset by nature. It represents a real thing, whether it's a sequestered ton of CO2 or the tree that's doing it or such, or technology avoiding or removing carbon. The end state is very similar, but we were able to build really a technology that incorporated the upstream and downstream mechanisms of exchange architecture, as well as incorporating transaction and clearing mechanisms. So that's really been, when you see all the pain points in deliveries or the pain points in performance or settlement risk, and we were able to sort of really just take a lot of the kinks and the friction out of that and developing this new market. So I think that's definitely the legacy of where I've been and what I could, either tweak, tune, or innovate in a new market architecture. When we began this in similar timeframes with CBL, we had a market that was worth about $100 million in year one. It's grown to $500 million. Anticipation is it could be a $2 to $3 billion market in very short order. And I mean, market share is always the, what is your market share? I think we sit at about 28% of market share currently. So I think it can be very proportional and scale. As you know, if you get an exchange model right, it's got a lot of value. We've seen value creation over the years from early markets architecture into to clearly multi-billion-dollar assets. So that's my aspiration. One of the interesting things about the environment is it's very policy-driven. right? It's got to, you've got to have a willingness to do it. When you see an example in the U.S., with the IRA input to $400+ billion, but or the SEC, the initiative they're taking from January 24 out, where you've got basically companies, listcos or licensed entities that have made any statements around green or environmental or ESG. Now all listed companies have an ESG policy filed. It can no longer be just a policy, it's got to be actionable. And so you're going to create a discipline of demand around not just shareholder willingness or environmental willingness or from a marketing aspect. This is going to go from the marketing side of corporations to the compliance and treasury and accounting side of corporations. And that's where we're going to see the demand. What the form takes of this decarbonization is the interesting part. What people are calling the ET, the energy transition state. It's probably pretty clear. You can look at a refinery and go, what do we need to do to go from the dirty end of a barrel to a clean barrel potentially, or petchems away from gasoline and kerosene to sustainable aviation fuel. That's physical transition. How do we stop driving? Will everybody be driving an EV in the future? Potentially, yes. But then you put strain on commodities, right? On nickel and copper and cobalt and stuff. So you've got, actually you're going to generate commodity demand cycles at the same time that you're trying to hedge your carbon. So there's a lot of different ways to hedge your carbon intensity, not just changing the way you do business, but also what are the underlying assets that you've got to acquire to support that. So it's going to be an interesting time going forward. The market that's building now too is actually a forward market is starting to build, and you've been around a long time like I have. You always see that spot market formation, and then you start to see the financialization of the underlying, and you see forward pricing because you've got demand for hedging. People have to plan ahead. It's not just today. And we're seeing that market formation around carbon and the assets underlying it. A lot of challenges though, because there's a lot of emotion around carbon, and you've still got deniers, but you always, it's a healthy market formation, I think, with a willingness today that we didn't necessarily have in the first decade of carbon under Kyoto and UN protocols.